This is Gowbarrow, which is next to Ullswater. So this is looking over at the farm from the top of Hallen Fell, and I've been here for about 3 years now. It's my wife's family farm, so she grew up here, and her granddad used to farm it. He had about 600 or 700 Swaledale ewes and about 80 or 90 Angus cattle, but unfortunately he passed away in the late 90s, and since then the family went over to grass letting the whole farm on annual kind of grazing licenses. So this next photo kind of is a sort of step on my journey, I suppose, towards regenerative farming. So when I moved here, obviously didn't know anyone. I had to try and get out and learn from other farmers and meet as many people as I could. So I joined the farmer network, Cumbria Farmer Network, which was great. And I went along to a few visits and things. And somehow, in a roundabout way, I heard about the PFLA. I found that very interesting. So I joined as a member, and then I became the Cumbrian Upland Group Coordinator. And this photo shows the first event that I organised for the PFLA. And it was actually at Nicola Renison's farm. The weather was, of course, horrendous on the day. But in the background, you can see a mob of about 600 ewes. I think they were in a sort of 2-acre paddock, and they were being moved every day. And I just thought this was really interesting. I had a background in farming because my parents had sheep down in Derbyshire. As you can tell by my accent, I'm not from Cumbria. I actually originate from Swindon. Spent a bit of time in Bristol and also Portsmouth, and lived quite a suburban life until I kind of met Claire and decided to be a farmer in Cumbria. So I'm coming at farming from a sort of new angle, I suppose. So this photo sort of shows kind of range of habitats that we have at Gowbarrow. We've got top fell, and we've got commercial forestry plantation. In the middle, it's kind of wood pasture, woodland, rough grazing. And then down by the lake, we've got, meadows, basically. Fast forward to kind of now, this shows what I've been doing for most of the summer, which is setting out electric fencing and moving cattle. I picked up a few tips from not only the Renisons, but also people like the Brewster brothers up in Scotland. I got a 50mm bit of blue pipe and I stuck it to the front of the quad bike. It means I can drive all over the electric fencing without switching it off, which is brilliant. And then I went on YouTube, and I've been looking at Greg Judy videos and things like that. I've adapted the quad bike now. Basically, it's a one-man job now to do fencing, and I can just do it really quickly. It just works really, really well. So about 12 months ago, we started a joint venture with Wilderculture, which is a community interest company. We're trying a hybrid between rewilding and regenerative agriculture on our farm. So essentially, we're using a large bank of deferred grazing to feed the cattle during the winter. And during the summer, we're using mob grazing, letting the grass grow as long as we can, ideally letting it all go to seed, and moving them every day for the last few months. We've seen some amazing growth rates from this. I've been weighing the cattle a lot. We managed to finish a 25-month-old bullock, and he was 650 kilograms live weight, slightly too fat, which was perfect because we're selling beef direct, so we need a good fat cover. He was growing at 2 kilograms a day for the last few months. I think it's pretty impressive what we can do, and we've managed to finish 4 done under 30 months. And we are the second farm in Cumbria to be certified pasture fed, and at the moment the only farm in the Lake District. Hopefully there'll be other people looking to go down this route in future. So yeah, with the Cumbrian Upland Group, I guess I had some success really in getting lots of people to that first event, even though the weather was kind of horrible. And then after that, I did a number of seminars, discussions. I wanted to do more farm visits, but of course, coronavirus came along and made it a bit more difficult. There were some positive things, certainly. I think it's great to get people thinking differently, really. But I always felt like maybe it's because I'm from Swindon, but people maybe think I'm a bit of a loony, and it would be great to get more of the kind of traditional fell farmers to come along to these types of events and try and get them thinking differently.
I'm Nick. I farm at Rennick near Penrith on the kind of edge of the Pennines with my husband Paul and our 2 kids. I'll explain a bit about what discussion groups have done for us on our farm, and then I will go on to my kind of work. So we moved here in 2012. It's 350 acres of kind of upland pasture land, I suppose. When we started, we were quite conventional in our thinking, and then we started to get a little bit interested in grass, and we didn't know much about grass at that point. And we formed a local discussion group just by ourselves, just a group of farmers. And we started talking about grass a lot, quite sadly so, really. This led us to visit some farmers in Northumberland called the Nellis Brothers, and they farm on a relatively big scale. It's very mixed. They've got sheep, cattle, pigs, poultry, but everything that they do is in a rotation. And they lamb outside, they calve outside. And the most important thing is that they're profitable. And for us, this was a real game changer. And I can remember Renault coming back from there saying, we're going to do this. So from that point, everything has been in a rotation. To begin with, we had a lot to learn, and it hasn't all been plain sailing. So apart from lambing time, when we do set stock for about 2.5 months, everything else, we're always in a rotation, moving every 1 or every 2 days. But it hasn't always been plain sailing. To begin with, back in 2014, we had swaledales. Now, if you put swaledales in a small area with walls and electric fence, they just jump over the fence or get tied up in the wire. So it hasn't all been easy, but we've persevered. And we then decided that we needed to improve our electric fencing around the farm. So we've got all the walls now have a hot wire with mains electric round. So we can then subdivide off them. We have invested quite a bit of money in infrastructure as far as water tanks and that kind of thing. But in the scheme of it, not very much money in comparison to some machinery you might buy when you're farming. By managing the grass like this, anyone that has done this will know, you then grow more grass. So we did the kind of farmer thing. We've got more grass, we need more sheep. So we upped our sheep numbers, and then in 2015, we lambed over 1,000 sheep. And this is when we came kind of unstuck. We just had sheep. There were some dairy heifers growing in the sheds, but on the grassland, it was predominantly sheep. So then we had a big worm burden. Lambs didn't grow very well. Alongside a trace element problem, we kind of had the year from hell, I suppose. And then we had grown lots of grass, been successful at that, but we had created a monoculture of sheep, I think. And nature doesn't like monocultures. So we started reducing our sheep numbers and building up a suckler cow enterprise. We've got to the stage in 2020, we lambed 500 sheep and we've calved 40 sucklers. Next year, it's likely to be 350 sheep and maybe 60 sucklers. So why do we do this, and why have we gone through all this pain and had to learn all this stuff? And the basic reason is money. And is it profitable? And I would say yes for us, and I can't speak for anyone else, but for us it is. And the reason it is because we don't use any fertilizer, we don't use any feed. All our lambs are gone by the end of August, be it store or fat. And the biggest important thing for us is our whole year is governed by grass growth. So we want the lambs gone so we can build up this wedge for the winter. The cattle are housed for the shortest time possible. Young stock are outside on bale pods. And although we aren't organic, we farm kind of organically. Alongside this, the genetics, we kind of changed our sheep breeds. So now we have Aberdeen Angus's and an Aberfield cross Clin U. So everything is from a very maternal base and designed to live outside. Alongside the discussion group and a visit to the Nellis's, what else has inspired us to change? I've already said this a little bit, but money, it's the margin. We don't think about individually high prices, and we don't really want our name in the paper, but we've got a really huge mortgage and we need to generate enough money to deal with that. So my question maybe to you all is, if we hadn't have had that financial pinch, would it have led us down that path? One of my mottos is that every day is a school day. We've had to think very differently about things. We try lots of different things, and sometimes we have a complete, utter disaster. But when things work well, it's good to share it with people. And even when things obviously don't work well, that's probably the more important time to share with people. I do lots of farmer meetings on farm. And when you're facilitating a farmer meeting, when it goes well, it's absolutely the best job in the world. So standing in a field like we are here, talking to a bunch of farmers, and it can be, you can see everything sinking in with these farmers, and it really, it's just a fantastic arena to learn in. So I personally like quite small groups, maybe less than 10. and any question, doesn't matter, no question is too daft really, and it's a very inclusive place to learn. And also to remember that everyone in that group is on a different journey. So some people might be just starting to rotationally graze. Some people might say, actually, I don't want to say anything today. I just want to come here and listen. And even if you just, one seed is dropped, they're just starting to think differently, then that's a success in my eyes. I think, to kind of wrap it up, in the uplands, we have got an amazing opportunity to grow largely grass-fed protein, which is in a way that is great for water holding. If we graze the land slightly differently, we can just manage it better for wildlife and biodiversity, and most importantly, make money. And that's it.
Our farm in Cumbria in the Lake District, we're just on the edge of the Lake District with an upland farm. I'm in partnership with my wife. I've got 4 kids that are there on the picture. They all help on the farm. We have 450 ewes that we lamb. It's all grass, our farm. We have 70 or 80 hogs each year that we fetch in. We have some cows. We have 6,000 hens for free-range egg production. I'm also a plumber, which I still do a few days a week because the wages are quite good. We also have a few pigs, and my wife and children ride horses. So we've got a bit going on. Historically, we didn't have loads of subsidy because we took the farm over 20 odd years ago and didn't have the historic payments. So we've always focused on profit. We need to make profit. We've got a lot of money borrowed, we need to pay back. What we're trying to do is to increase productivity with less inputs. My wife and the girls are big into high welfare. They want everything right. We're trying to improve our soils, the soil structure, fertility, productivity of the soils and the whole farm, really. We were on a countryside stewardship scheme 17 years ago when we first sort of took everything over and increased the size of the farm. We've done hedge laying and such like that in the past and are still on with that sort of stuff at the moment. My wife's grandfather always said that we're only looking after the land while we're here. If we can leave it in a better state than what we took it over in, you know, we're going in the right direction. I go to meetings with Nick Renison, Danny Teasdale, Sam, HDB meetings, Ullswater Catchment Management. We're in a vet group, which I think it just encourages you to think about how everything's running, you know, so it's your animal welfare and everything as well. NSA group meetings, Pasture for Life, and I'm in Farmer Network. So you see a lot of inspiring people and a lot of farmers that's probably doing it a lot better than what we're doing it. We're just sort of winging it and learning things as we go along. But if you can pick up ideas from these other farmers, there's some fantastic farmers doing some really good jobs. If you can take a bit of that home, all your farms are different. If we can improve things and just use some of these ideas to make our farms better, I think it's a really good thing. I think also I'm really keen to have my children involved. You know, they're the future of farming. If they can become part of it and learn some of the stuff that we've learned and some of the stuff that we're learning from other people, I think it's a really good thing. We've got land here, 3 different blocks of land, because we've got some at Watermillock and we've got land here at Penruddock, which is split by the A66 really. So we end up running 3 flocks of sheep because moving them, it isn't easy with the A66. You have to trailer everything across really because it's too busy to run sheep across. We've always done a bit of rotational grazing. When I first had a field, I had 5 acres where I used to live at Skelton. One of the first things I did, this is going back in the late 80s, I put a fence through the middle of the field and split it so that we could rotate sheep back and forward. Now, I think that was our start of rotational grazing, which, you know, for a long time I thought I was probably doing a good job. And yes, it was better than just having them set stock, but it wasn't really a good job when you get into more, you know, looking at how you could improve things. We've probably been at fault of overgrazing in the past, probably keeping too many sheep. We'll have a good year and you maybe keep a few more, and then you have a bad year or it's a bad lambing time or something, you keep a few less. About 450 is sort of right for us. We've kind of gone out of cows a little bit because selling cows and calves, and we're having a good trade for a few years there, but it hasn't been just as good. We've reduced our cows right down, and I think in the future we'll probably go for a more traditional breed. These last 2 years we've really got into rotational grazing. I think we've kind of tried to prove to ourselves that we can do it. We haven't bought electric fence yet, although I was at a meeting with Nick Renison the other day. seen Richard Carruthers with his electric fences, and we've got a list and we're going to order some electric fences for this next year. But what we've done so far is bunch our sheep up after lambing time into between 100 and 150 ewes in each bunch. Some of the fields are very small, 3/4 of an acre to maybe an acre. We try to have long grass like this, you know, the longer the better. In the past we've worried about grass going to seed or it getting too long and it possibly being wasted. We don't worry about that anymore. If it gets trampled in or if it gets muck on it or whatever, it'll stand itself back up and we'll graze it the next time round. Some of the fields we've had to mix and match our way of grazing. Some fields the sheep will be in maybe even just from the morning till night. Other fields they'll be in for 24 hours. Some of the bigger fields, like our biggest field on the farm is 9 acres. So even with the bigger fields it'll work better with electric fences, but we might leave them in 3 or 4 days to eat fields off. We try to have a long rest before they go back into the field. We've called it rotational grazing in the past, but I think working towards regenerative grazing is the way to go. It really does make a difference. We've looked at flock health planning. We're planning more with the electric fences, what we're going to do. We've improved genetics, Innovis tups and maternal sires. We're trying to run a closed flock now rather than buying in mule gimmer lambs and stuff like that. We've improved our hedges. We've laid hedges, coppiced hedges, planted new hedges up. We've done this because, well, I like to see more wildlife. If you see more red squirrels, curlews, all that sort of thing on your land, it's fantastic. Things like that have been in decline, and we haven't really thought about it in the past, but it's coming, you know, everybody's thinking about it. Until you actually start looking at it, you don't realise how much everything's declined. Hedgehogs, butterflies, all sorts of things, you know, if we can encourage them, I think we're doing a good job. We've been on the hedgerows and boundaries scheme with the countryside stewardship scheme. Danny, with the Ullswater catchment management, they've put in more trees. We've planted some new hedges and such like. Woodland Trust are supplying trees. Volunteers have been helping. It's fantastic to have people helping and doing things like that. We wanted to prove to ourselves, you know, can it work without the electric fences, without spending a lot? And yes, it can. There's advantage. The advantages are fantastic. We can grow so much more grass. Everything's more resilient. Our soil structure, I think, is improving. In spring, we had 2-3 months where it was really dry. Yes, we were short of grass. It wasn't the length of the grass that's on the picture that you're looking at there, but we never ran out of grass. We were moving sheep and you were feeling like you were moving them just to change the view, but it wasn't. It was working. We still kept moisture in the ground when it was dry, and then on the flip side of that, in the wet times, I think our ground is actually staying drier in the wet times because of the way we're grazing it now. In the past, I always sort of used to notice that our ground really dried out in the summer. You could hardly knock posts in when you were fencing and stuff like that. And in the winter, it was really, really wet. Well, when you were grazing it down to 1 inch long all the time, and then only letting it grow to 2 or 3 inches before you put stock back in, it didn't get chance. Now that it's got that cover on the ground, everything's so much better. We've got more species of grass. We've got more species of flowers and stuff. There's more insects, moths, hedgehogs, frogs and toads. The kids, my daughter has an Instagram page and she puts pictures on of wildlife and all sorts of stuff that's there that wasn't really there before. So I think that's doing a good job. We've got lots of room for improvement. Nick and lots of other people, they're doing fantastic jobs, and we're just sort of playing catch up really. But hopefully, I think if we buy electric fences and get into that next year, then bigger fields that we haven't been able to graze right, we can split them up and do a better job of that. But I think it all is going in the right direction, and I think it's a really good way to do things. Disadvantages. I did want to say the disadvantages because it's not all plain sailing. This is us moving some of our ewes and lambs through the village. This was a bunch of ewes. I think there was 150 ewes here with twin lambs. I've got good sheepdogs and I've got 4 kids, but you do kind of need them when you're moving through the village like this, and you've got a long line. Like the sheep go up that road as far as you can see, and it's a long way back to where the kids are on the quad bike behind them. It still does work. We've got lots of spread out fields. If all of the fields was in a block and we just had to move them from one to the other, it would be easier, but we still can get away with it, you know. So it is a disadvantage The other disadvantage, our sheep pens aren't big enough. Our sheep pens are made for handling 40 or 50 hours with the lambs, and big numbers like this, it isn't as easy, but it's all workable. We split the sheep up, put them in a paddock next to the sheep pens, and then work through them. So it all works. Worm burdens on your lambs, I think, need watching. I think to be on top of your sheep with any system, you need attention to detail, and it all needs to work well. We do fecal egg counting to make sure we're dosing them at the right time, but it is something that you really need to keep on top of, because you maybe do get a build-up of a worm burden. But I think also they're rotating them around lots of fields, so, you know, they're not getting back into them fields just as soon. You can keep your sheep moving, and yes, there is a worm challenge, but it's not anything that's really bad. I think sheep in the past have had a lot of bad press, and there's lots of people that think, well, you can't do rotational grazing or regenerative grazing with sheep. I disagree with that, because I think you can do it. I think you just need to be doing it in the right way. And the way that it's worked for us this year, we've had more grass than we've ever had. I know we've a few less cattle, but, you know, when you're only talking of 6 or 8 cows, it doesn't make a hell of a difference to us. That we've always been more of a sheep farm, and it still is working really well. Our winters probably don't work as good, because a lot of our rented ground we don't have from the 1st of January until the 1st of April. So it does get tightened up onto our own fields, and they possibly do get overgrazed. But we put some sheep inside. We try not to winter them away, because we like to be looking after them ourselves rather than letting somebody else look after them. We usually make 300 round bales every year. This year we've made 400, and we've still got more grass than we've ever had going into winter. So if anybody wants to buy some round bales, we've got some to sell this time. My wife's grandfather always used to say as well, you should never worry about having too much grass. It's just when you haven't got enough that you should be worrying. So that's me finished. Thank you.